You've had a bit of an amazing life. Some terrible things have happened to you, but you've turned them into very positive things. And quite frankly, I know it's probably going to be a little bit awkward for you to hear this, but you're really kicking goals and you're starting to achieve things. But it started out from something sad. Could you tell us about your son's diagnosis?
Sure. Okay, so basically in January 2020, my son Sebastian, at the age of 2, he was just turned 2, was diagnosed with brain cancer. And I guess that came after probably 3 months of investigating and pushing to get him looked at, via MRI, because I just knew something was wrong. My husband and I had noticed some weakness in his left side. The GP was concerned, pediatrician was concerned. So it was just, following that gut instinct of making sure he was seen to before something awful happened. And of course, then we found the tumor. So, so that was in January 2020.
Wow. All right. Now, I'd imagine that's had some pretty big effects on everyone's lives. Could you tell us, what's happened to him, and then if you mind rolling in, because all these things will be interrelated, I'm sure, what it meant to you and your family?
Yeah, sure. He had an MRI at the Cairns Hospital on the 8th of January 2020, and immediately we were airlifted. Pretty much within 24 hours, we landed in Brisbane by Royal Flying Doctors. I think took most of the people at the hospital by surprise, because in general, he was really well. He had left side weakness. He had a couple of little things that were, in hindsight, big red flags, but he was living a really good life. He had all these milestones he was meeting and that sort of thing. But it came as quite a shock. So we landed down in Queensland Children's Hospital. And I think by the 12th, he was in surgery. So a big 8-hour, brain open, skull open with brain exposed, and removing 50% of that tumor because of the location of it, which is the middle of the brain was where his was. If they were to take it all out, it would have left him with severe brain damage, and the size of it too. So it's quite large. So we're talking the size of an orange in the middle of his brain. So that was just, that in itself was shocking, I guess. My husband and I flew down with Sebastian, and we left our 3 daughters at home. They were at a sleepover at their grandparents', thinking we were just going to be gone for the night, because we had to be at the hospital at some ridiculous hour, like 6 o'clock in the morning, the day of the MRI. So we'd organised for them to go have a sleepover the night before. And so that was really tough. We didn't see them then, 99 days it was. We were just thrown into this awful world of just trying to get Sebastian back to living, I guess. And because COVID hit very quickly after in March, by the time COVID had well and truly locked Brisbane down, the girls weren't able to then move. They were stuck. So the timing was shocking. So really tough on all of us as a family unit, but then individually we all really struggled with the separation. And, when we finally got home, we've spent the last 2.5 years just, I guess, repairing emotionally, psychologically. And we're doing a really good job of that. We've had lots of help and lots of support. But I guess it's just something that will never go away. That experience was very traumatic for us all. So
yeah, you turn up to an MRI and next thing you're in. I understand you may have some images to show us.
So if you can see that.
Right now, my gosh,
So that's progressive. That's, I think, the first 4 you can see there, that's the different angles of when it was first discovered.
God,
and then the bottom 2 images are after surgery, so after 50% was taken out.
I don't want me asking, obviously as a mother you knew something was wrong, so he had a bit of some issues with his left side, but what else? How did you know? What symptoms was he showing? What was happening?
So I guess the biggest most obvious physical red flag was he had extremely bowed legs and pigeon toes. So, and I guess that was his body reacting to pressure or a lack of space on the right side of his brain. So funnily enough, our first daughter, Antonia, she had very bowed legs and pigeon toed as well, right? And she was little. But by 18 months, as the doctors said they would, they self-corrected. And she's, if anything, she's knock-kneed now, like it was just a thing that kids went through. So having had gone through that with our first daughter, we didn't really stress about Sebi. And, we were told boys take longer to correct and all this sort of thing. And the only other really, I guess, big thing was that he just didn't sleep. From about 6 months on, he stopped sleeping, and he used to wake in pools of sweat, vomiting, but not all the time. It was very sporadic and never really, the doctors just said, oh, he's just hot. He's just a hot body, but I was changing changes of clothes because he'd just be drenched in sweat. So that was, I guess, the two most alarming things, that when we realized that it was a brain tumor, that we just thought, oh my gosh, how did we not know? On their own, it's not that big a deal. And a lot of parents say they don't get any sleep with their babies. So, yeah, that was basically it.
That's it. Me personally, I would have been a
yeah. Well, we were. And the thing was, Matt, our three daughters before Sebastian, they were all sleeping by 6 weeks old. And, I was that mum at playgroup that everyone go, oh, roll their eyes. Yeah, don't talk to her baby sleep, So when I got one that didn't sleep, I thought, well, okay, that's it. I've got one that doesn't sleep. I get it now. It wasn't, everyone talks about the lack of sleep when you have a baby. It's not completely outrageous to hear that. So, yeah, coupled with the night sweats, a little bit more concerning, but having had three daughters and then having a boy, like I kept constantly hearing, oh, boys are different to girls, don't stress too much. They're more active. They're hot, their body temperature's higher, so yeah. I guess the left side weakness, that was the last thing to show. And that was the most alarming. When he couldn't do a high five with his left hand, I just straight away knew all of a sudden, okay, so the bowed legs, maybe that's not bowed legs. Maybe that's a weakness and his body's compensating for his inability to keep his feet straight. So
that it just would have been like traumatic. Quite. The stresses and strains that would put on a family. But I understand your girls have been pretty good, especially with the sibling jealousy thing. Like,
yeah,
would you mind talking through some of that? Or
yeah, definitely. The girls have been great. Overall, I think we've all come out of it really lucky in the respect that, we just did the best we could in the moment. We had never been through anything like this. No one had even really died in my family. Of, lost my granddad. But other than that, this whole, I guess, challenge with death or facing death for the first time, and not only that, but with our own child, it really shook us up a lot. Kids are very resilient, so the girls probably fared a lot better than we did, and depending on their ages. So our middle daughter Josie, who at the time was 6, she probably struggled the most. She was at that developmental age where she was becoming very aware of her feelings, other people's feelings, and just quite emotional at the time. We all were left with, different levels of PTSD, of course, because it was so many levels of trauma. There was the separation anxiety. There was, the fear side of it, the unknown side of it. Like, we had no idea whether Sebastian was going to live or not for a good 6 months. And then, yeah, just not being able to communicate with each other, as often as we needed to. There was just so much going on all the time. So, look, we all did really well. The kids did really well. But like I said in the beginning, we are still working on that. We work every day on that. The girls still have nightmares every now and then. We all do, actually. But I guess at the end of the day, we've been through something pretty terrifying. So it takes a lot to scare us now. And we've still got Sebastian. So we are living like we are surviving. Well, we are survivors. So it's pretty empowering, and it's a pretty positive mindset to be in.
See, that's it. When people talk about, PTSD, like I'm really concerned about the way we frame it. It's like, you think of the conceptual framework around that, Crystal. It's like something traumatic happens to you. It's supposed to damage you. It's supposed to make you feel bad, and blah blah blah. That's kind of what's implied. Now, yes, it will make you feel bad. Like if something terrible like that is imposed on you, you're going to feel feelings that you didn't know you have, and all this kind of stuff. So much post-traumatic stress growth.
Yeah.
Like, and I know a lot of emergency services workers. I know, a few veterans. I know some of these people that genuinely, although what happened to them was terrible, and they go, wouldn't wish it on anyone. And if I could get the insight and an understanding and perspective I have now without having go through that, that would be fantastic. But like the two things are so interlinked, and people understand that unless you walk through something like that, you're never really going to get the perspective.
No, and I don't think you're ever the same again. And I think that's what people don't realize. When you're dealing with PTSD, the triggers change all the time. And that's something I'm learning to deal with along the way. I mean, for the first 12 months, for some completely unexplained reason, I could not, if a chopper went over us, especially the emergency services chopper went over us when I was playing tennis, or whether I was at the supermarket or at home, it just crippled me. I had to just physically sit down, and I would just completely lose it. And it was, still to this day, don't understand why, because we never went in an emergency chopper. We never went in an helicopter. There's actually no direct reason as to why that would traumatize me or bring up these feelings of trauma. But for whatever reason, that happened. And that's really hard to deal with, I guess. It just keeps changing. So it's something you have to keep working on. It's not something that you go and get your coping mechanisms and you just figure it out. You're left with it forever. I don't know. I mean, now this is one situation for me. I don't know how emergency services, for example, do it, where they're faced with very traumatic scenes on a regular basis. It must be very exhausting.
Yeah, it is. Anyway, but part of that growth for you, coping mechanism, is you started to develop a talent. That's right.
Yeah.
Would you tell us about that?
Okay. So very organically, I put pen to paper in that year we were in hospital with Sebastian. It started off like I was just writing notes down, petrified I was going to forget something that the doctors had said to us, in the respect that it was like learning a new language. And I did talk about that in my book, that it was just like a verbal assault every day of all this medical jargon. And I was just completely overwhelmed by the information. And of course, when it's your child, when it's you go, okay, yeah, I'm going to process all that, and then I'll ask questions if I need to. But when it's your child and you're making decisions on their behalf, it just seemed even more important to understand and remember every little detail. So it then slowly started to morph into medical details, into, journaling how I was feeling, my regrets, my concerns. And by the end of the 12 months, I had a very substantial pile of notes. I wasn't seeing it as, writing a story, so to speak. I was just writing everything down, and that was just the way I coped. At the end of it, I just thought, wow, it was scribbled on napkins or on, the back of medical records, whatever I could find in the moment. For whatever reason, it just really, it allowed me to step out of myself for a little bit and, expel all those concerns and that sort of thing.
And the other great thing about that is, I think it helps people get perspective, not just in the sense of putting other problems into perspective, but an understanding of self. So, you know, you're talking about that PTSD thing and emergency services workers and stuff. I know a bit about that, and I'm familiar with some of the literature, and I've spoken to quite a few people about it. And one of the main things is, like, yes, people get traumatized by seeing all these terrible things. And the best analogy I ever heard early in my career, a senior constable, I was talking to this guy, and there was a police officer just went to bits in the middle.
Yeah.
This guy like went to bits,
Mm-hmm.
crying and fell on the ground, all this kind of stuff, and it was awful. We were sitting there eating our burgers. Anyway, so the senior constable explains this to me later. He goes, "Look, Matt, it's like this, and this wasn't a prop. I didn't do it on purpose, but like, because I'm just drinking tea." He said, like, a human being is just like a cup, because you can fill cup right up to the top, and you could even water. So, you know, we've all seen it, you know, when the water just bulges up, you get a little dome.
Yep.
But that's it.
Mm.
Can't put any more water
in
that cup. And what you do, because you know how it kind of like, you get that cascading and it all just comes out and like, like it's kind of, that's it, done.
Yeah. Brilliant. Love that. It's so true though, isn't it?
That's what it's like.
Yeah.
But like with the vast majority of police and soldier PTSD too is actually related to them finding out stuff about themselves.
Yeah. Yep.
So like how they acted in a certain situation.
Yes.
Especially if they didn't act in accordance with their self-image, in accordance with the beliefs that they have, with, you know. So to use a movie analogy, and you know, we've all seen Star Wars. Find out, and it's really good. It's so well done. You know the bit in, I think it's Empire Strikes Back, where Luke goes into the tree and Yoda says, "Whatever you take in there is you know what you're going to find." Against the advice, he takes a weapon. Yeah. Comes across Darth Vader, has a sword fight with him, knocks his mask off, looks on it, and it's his face. Yeah. Yeah. Discovers that he is the darkness, and the darkness is in him. It's a bit of his dad, and it's a bit of like who he could. Yeah. A bit of like, absolutely. Yeah. That's what it is. That's the vast majority of emergency services and veteran PTSD. Yeah, it's tough, isn't it? And I guess I can definitely relate to that, like what you said about, you know, you learn about yourself in these, I guess, challenging situations. And I guess something I took away from our experience was that when I'm struggling, I cry, and when my husband's struggling, he yells. So I guess, and there's no right or wrong reason to the way we deal with situations either. And I guess it's just knowing when to let yourself go a little bit and release, because that's the worst thing is if we try and keep it all together. And I guess me writing was my way of releasing. So I guess in the long run, it did save me a lot of heartache. And yeah, I mean, you know, last year was tough too. It just is an ongoing thing. But living in the moment helps a lot too. So, and at the moment, things are pretty great. So indeed, and living in the moment, and the other perspective it grants you is you understand you're actually living in a narrative. That's true. Very true. You know, when we tell, because we tell stories about ourselves and to ourselves. And when you tell a story, you know, when something happens to you, it's not so much what happens to you, it's what that means. It's like, well, then you've got to reorganize everything that happened to you in the past. Might have had this, that's formed an image of me. It's going to have to the future. It's going to have. So then you start to understand, it's like, wait, no, I'm living, you know, the materialist mindset where we're just living in this linear progress of time. It's like, no, that's wrong. In a story. But your story, like with all these things you put together, ended up in a book. Could you show us the book? Could you tell us about it? Yeah, sure. So this was the book that came out of my son's diagnosis, basically. So it's called Boy of Steel. This basically came about, like I said, I took all those, you know, scratches on paper and all of the information that I'd written down throughout the year, and I began compiling it in I guess a narrative form. And in the beginning, again, it wasn't about writing a book and selling it. It was about documenting what we'd been through for the sake of Sebastian. I mean, he was only 2 when this happened. So, you know, and that was a blessing in some ways because, you know, my husband and I carried a lot of the trauma for him. He didn't
really understand what
Yeah,
was
you do.
going on. Doesn't even now, he doesn't remember any of it. So I wanted to be able to refer back to it, as hard as that's going to be, for when he's older, and have a true perspective of, and a true recount of what happened. Not, oh yeah, you had surgery and it was really hard and we all struggled. You know, I wanted the nitty gritty. I wanted him to know everything that we'd been through. And so, yeah, Boy of Steel was born. It's basically a year in the life of a family faced with a childhood cancer diagnosis. And it's broken up. So it goes between, you know, a narrative and then like actual excerpts from my journals, which are really very raw. There's not much editing going on there, but I wanted to give a very, very true representation of how hard it was. And I guess, you know, bring to life, you know, how tough some of the parents have got it in these hospitals, because it's pretty awful. Wonderful facilities, but it's pretty awful to go through. So yeah, and that's how Boy of Steel came about.
Well, it the good thing is it uncovered a talent that you have for writing, and it's led to a couple of other books. So I'm going to embarrass you and show you on the screen, and you can talk through them.
Yeah, sure. Okay. Oh, goody. Okay, so yeah, we've got Boy of Steel there. Now it did make it to an Amazon bestseller list, which I'm really proud of, because actually a bit of a trick, self-publishing. We need to get into that, Matt, more often. But so when you list your book on Amazon, you actually put it into a category. So Boy of Steel actually went into the oncology category. And there's not much happening in the oncology category. It's pretty doom and gloom, a lot of reference, a lot of, you know, medical journals and that sort of thing. So Boy of Steel sat on #1 for quite some time, which is really impressive. And I guess once I started getting lots of positive feedback about the way Boy of Steel was changing people's lives and allowing them to get through their own cancer diagnosis, it was a huge confidence boost. So yeah, that led to 2 more books pretty quickly. And so the second one, 6 Steps to Self-Publishing, with Crystal Leonardi and myself. And that basically came off the back of self-publishing Boy of Steel. So I chose to self-publish Boy of Steel to, I guess, maintain the integrity. And I was very, very protective of my story. It was very personal, as you can appreciate. And I just wanted to have complete control over what was published. I didn't want anyone messing with it at all. And self-publishing was pretty tricky. I just basically took it on and had a couple of people tell me I could do it. So I did it. And I wanted to share the knowledge that I learned through my own experience, but also through the mistakes I made myself, but also the, you know, the positives of self-publishing. So that's a very exciting publication for me, and that's led to some writers' workshops, which is where I met you, Matt, and I guess giving me a bit of a platform and a resource to help other writers to self-publish like I did, because I reckon it's the best thing to do.
Well, okay, let's dig into that a little bit before we go back to my brother Sebastian. And the other thing is, thanks for the signed copy.
Nice.
Yeah.
Have you had time to read it yet?
I've started it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I've started it. Yeah, yeah.
Good.
And I told a friend a joke because I showed it to my friend. I said, "Oh, I got this book. I'm really keen to read it." This friend of mine goes, "How much was it?" I said, "Oh, free," but she had to charge me for the signature on it.
Ah. Yeah, that's the expensive part.
Yeah. You can use that one. You can use that one-liner.
Love it.
Here's the thing. I mean, anyone who writes, obviously, you did it to be read for son, so that it wasn't for a larger audience or anything else like that. It wasn't so much something that you were chasing for validation, but like there is a certain degree of validation when it comes to writing. Like you want to be read, and you want someone else to, you know, to go to the bestsellers. You want people to say it's good. You want all that kind of stuff. And getting your book published by someone else means that a publisher reads it and goes, "Oh, that's good. We are going to put money in this, invest it," because it's a business decision. Fundamentally, what they're saying is we think this is good enough. Your thought, your organized thought, which is what writing is good enough that we can make money off it. Why, considering that, would you recommend self-publishing? Because I mean, it's
Well, I guess it's
the
like
validation.
anything.
Don't you
Yeah, the
want the
validation is
validation?
good. It's like anything though. If if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. And I guess what you get with that validation is not what you expect. I've got no problem with, being completely honest with the fact that with Boy of Steel, once I finished it and I realized that it probably had a broader audience than just my family, I submitted it to the big publishing houses. I wanted someone to give me that validation and say, yeah, this is great. We're going to make money off this. You're going to be this famous author and it's going to help lots of people. But when I failed at that, I guess I realized, and when I say fail, I didn't particularly have that fantasy, dream book deal come my way. I had someone really special just say to me, you know what, just go ahead and do it anyway. You don't need someone else to give you that validation. Give it, find it for yourself. And so that's why 6 Steps to Self-Publishing is so important, because it gives writers that tool to be able to do it if they choose to do that. I have absolutely, I'm working with writers at the moment who we've just about got their manuscript ready for to go to the editor. But I absolutely will be, encouraging them to submit to the big houses, the big publishing houses. Go for it, do it. Because if that might not be my cup of tea, but it certainly might be someone else's. So I guess it's just about being informed and making an informed decision about which direction you want to take your publishing journey. And that's, either way, I guess that's the thing. I didn't think it was possible to self-publish before I did it myself. So, yeah.
And what would you say to people who were considering self-publishing?
Just go for it. I think, look, it is a business. When, we're not publishing 50,000 words to sit back and just look at it. If you're going to decide to self-publish or publish it at all, you want to have a really good crack at it. You want to get yourself out there. You want to get your book out there. So decide what your budget is and cater your publishing journey to that. Because I guess at the end of the day, like I said, it's a business. So you're limited to what your budget is. And it doesn't mean you can't. If your budget's very slim, it doesn't mean you can't self-publish. It just means it might take that little bit longer. Go for it.
No, that really is so cool. But it kind of grew with the eating, because again, we've got this. I think for me, part of what's so cool about it is like terrible thing happens.
Mm-hmm.
Engage in activity to try and relieve the suffering and trauma of that.
Mm-hmm.
Discover that you've got a story to tell and a talent. Leads to, which is an amazing thing just in itself. Like if the story had ended there, I'd still be like, kudos, we'd still actually be doing this.
Yeah.
Oh, it turns out I can actually run start up a small publishing company, publish it myself, and I know you're not making multi-millions out of it, but like,
have go. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a business. But that has led, and again, like if the story stopped there, well, we'd still be having this interview. But it's led to public speaking. It really has. It's just grown with the eating. Surely.
Yeah. Look, and I think something I've learned that's been really valuable to me for my own self-confidence and being able to have, I guess, the tenacity to just go ahead and do this, is realizing that what I considered to be failures in my life before were actually stepping stones to getting to where I am right now. So, I went to uni and spent 4 years of my life studying and then decided I didn't want to do that anymore. And always really had this, not a regret. Never regretted it. Still don't regret not going ahead with it, with a teaching career. But I guess it would just always irked me that I should have done something better with that, But what I realized is that gave me the tools to be able to write a damn book, What I learned at university was invaluable to being able to research, for one, how to do that, being able to put words together, string some words together that were entertaining, and be able to do that. So I guess, it just if we sort of take that perspective on where we're at right now, it's all about knowing what we've learned to get to this place right now. So look, I think everyone's got a story to tell, and I think everyone has the tools to do it. It's just, getting the right resources under you and just, setting yourself some realistic goals, I guess.
I suppose all that was encapsulated in the old statement that, that I used to hear as a kid, like, the Lord God Almighty works in mysterious ways.
Yeah. And,
and
that's
the ask that you're getting right now.
Yeah, it's a tough pill to swallow. I just, the saying, everything happens for a reason, that, that has never sat right with me since my little boy was diagnosed with cancer, because what is the reason, for goodness sake? But I guess it's along that same lines of, there's never a wasted opportunity. There's never stupid questions, and it's all about growth. And I think as long as we're growing, it's like self-publishing, even if it takes you 10 years to do it, if you just keep at it, and, stay true to your purpose, I think it's always going to be a positive outcome.
Okay, well, that's very important. I can't let that stay true to your purpose. So you would suggest to a person is like, sit down and ask themselves, what's my aim here? What is this about? Is this a bit of a vanity project? And there's nothing wrong with that, incidentally. Like,
no.
Is this a business decision? Do I just want to tell a story? Is this actually just for my kids? I don't know what.
Yeah, it all matters. It all counts. I mean, at the end of the day, the things you've just said then would be what I would consider nailing down a business plan. At the end of the day, like I said, writing a book, it is a business. It's not, okay, it's a wonderful hobby, and writing is a creative outlet and all that sort of thing. But if you're going to get your book published, it's not something you just do, for shits and giggles. But realistically, we all want our book read. Otherwise, why publish? Yeah. I mean.
Okay. Now, it did lead to another book. So we're going to quickly have a look, and I'll get you to talk through My Brother Sebastian.
Yeah. Okay. My Brother Sebastian. So this one's a real, if there is such a thing as a passion project, this is it for me, because this was done after all the difficult stuff. We'd gone through all that. And, talking about purpose, in the beginning with Boy of Steel, my purpose was really to help other parents. I saw a lot of traumatized parents in the hospital, a lot of relationship breakdowns, a lot of struggle, like a lot of honest to goodness people who couldn't work because they were in the hospital with their child 24/7 for the rest of that child's life. My Brother Sebastian, though, comes back to the kids, and not just my kids, but those kids that are in hospital. And I really, really had this strong need to create a resource that the kids could have in hospital. Because I had nothing, my girls had nothing, Sebi had nothing. There's a lot of resources out there, but I tell you what, they're like so 80s. There's no nice pictures and too many words and all the scientific talk and no love behind them, just, Timmy has leukemia and it's like really horrible. But it's not uplifting. It's not something the child wants to read over and over again. We all go mad with our children. They want to read the same book 50, 100, millions of times. I wanted My Brother Sebastian to be just like that. And for kids in hospital, it can be that, or families of kids in hospital can be that, because it's real and it's honest. It's informative, but it's also heartfelt. It was very proud of this one. It's really, really exciting to have it out there now.
Well, so you should be, if I could make the observation. Now, besides the cancer, and the getting the no's from the publishing houses, like what other barriers did you overcome?
Look, I guess my biggest challenge was, I touched on a little bit before, self-confidence, and that's everybody. I think we all suffer from a little bit of self-confidence. We all need to back ourselves more. I've done lots of things to improve that. I'm a student. I think I'm just one of those people that always is a student. So I do a lot of courses. I do a lot of writing workshops, do a lot of mentorships. But I guess, budget's always a big thing. I'm a stay-at-home mum. Money's not just falling off the money tree out the back. Um, so I guess, being realistic about my goals and also being realistic about how quickly I can do things, even if I want them to be done right now. But yeah, managing being a mum and trying to run a business at the same time, giving equal amounts of time to the business and the kids and the husband and the house and everything else, the farm. So yeah, lots of challenges, but all totally worth it. I mean,
well,
if
obviously,
you just,
isolation and distance would have to be one because you're on a farm, like you're in the.
Yeah, well, see, it's funny because I used to see it as a challenge, but now I actually see it as a benefit. Especially since COVID, I actually quite like the fact that I'm nowhere near anybody. I have peace and serenity, mind, body, and soul, 24/7 at my disposal. So, and we're only an hour and a half from Cairns, so it's not that far away. It's just far enough away, to be honest. But yeah, look, everything's accessible online now, so I don't see the distance or the isolation as a negative. I find this just like absolute paradise and a wonderful creative environment to be in. So yeah, I'm cool.
My middle daughter, like when COVID started and the lockdowns happened, she was just in heaven. She was just I trained my entire life.
Yeah.
Like now finally being an introvert that wants to sit in your room with books.
Yeah.
Like celebrating.
And so funnily enough, funny story, by the time, so we went through a lot of lockdowns in Brisbane, but by the time Sebastian was allowed to leave the hospital, he had to stay in Brisbane. We weren't allowed to actually go home just because he was so high risk of, stroke or whatever. We were able to go and stay with family at East Brisbane, which was only about 7 k's from the hospital. So we had medical clearance to do that. After 6 weeks, I remember the first block was 6 weeks, the really bad one where you weren't even allowed in your backyard without a face mask. Like you were not allowed to leave the house. It was really bad. You were allowed to do exercise, I think, for up to 2 hours a day, and you were allowed to drive within 5 kilometers of your home or where you were staying. So literally, we were staying with Sam's auntie, well, Sebastian and I'd say to her some days, can you please take us for a drive? Like we were like the pet dogs, take us for a drive so we put our head out the window, experience something else, some other scenery other than the lounge room in the backyard. It was shocking. And for the first time in my life, I actually understood the true meaning of cabin fever. I mean, we had serious cabin fever and all we wanted to do was go for a drive, just to look around, not at anything or anyone, just to get out of the house. It was just terrible.
You think really, like if we lock up our pets all the time.
I know. Oh, it's shocking. I totally understood after that. It was just.
That's why Fido goes crazy when I go near them.
Yeah, like the days are long when you're not allowed to go anywhere. Terrible. But we got through it, I guess. But geez, yeah, won't ever forget that. Those lockdowns were shocking.
What's your takeaway message?
Oh, that's a good question.
What do you want to tell the good viewers of Northern Vibe?
Look, I guess I just want to my message basically in life with everybody I come across is don't hold back on yourself. Give yourself the best shot at being successful, because I think until you get yourself out of that comfort zone, you're not going to know what you're really, what your potential is and what you're really what your worth is and what you're capable of. And whether it's writing a book or running a marathon or, anything that you want to achieve in your life, you can do it. It's not unachievable. So just go for it. Nothing scares me anymore. I tell you what, after 2020, I'm like, yeah, bring it. Oh, except skydiving. I still wouldn't do that, but yeah. I wouldn't jump off a waterfall or anything stupid, but I would, most things I'd just get in there and have a go. What's the worst that can happen? Failure. Who cares? Live another day.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's a distinction, because you can have moral courage but no physical courage, and I know people that have got heaps of physical courage that would literally jump off and charge a machine gun nest, but like if you threaten their comfort zone, or their self-image, or like a secure job or something like that, they're like,
yeah. Absolutely. And that's where all this public speaking's come, you know, it's evolved for me, because there's just no way 3 years ago I would have been vomiting, shaking in my boot. Like, it just would never have happened. I would never have been able to do it. Now I just think, well, what's the word? I'm prepared. I've prepared. If I still stuff it up, so what? Go home and have a laugh about it. I mean,
no dead babies.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly, Matt, right? It's like, you know, perspective. It's all about the perspective. And if you don't try, you'll never know, you know? So